So the other day I did a video talking about the Steam Summer Sale and about 6 or 7 different games that I was looking forward to that had been on my wish list for a while, but ultimately I was just kind of waiting for a price drop to see if I could get them at a good deal. And having only spent just a little bit of time with each of those titles so far, I can already say that I would probably recommend most of those games. So if you want to check that video out, I'll go ahead and link it up here somewhere. However, today's video is a little bit different because rather than hopping around kind of buffet style with some new games that I've picked up and only spent a little bit of time with, rather every game on this list is either a game that I've either beaten outright or I've spent so much time with it that I can confidently recommend it and think that it's a game that you should definitely look into if you have a Steam Deck and you want to take advantage of the summer sale with a game that will definitely provide a good experience. But before we get started, I should point out that most of the games on this list are games that I mostly played on platforms that were not the Steam Deck. However, every one of the titles on this list is listed as a verified title for the Steam Deck and in fact is on sale for the Steam Summer Sale. So with all that out of the way, let's just go ahead and dive right in, starting with What Remains of Edith Finch. Now you could probably classify What Remains of Edith Finch as more of an experience than a game. In fact, it wouldn't be unfair to call it a walking simulator. However, I would not dismiss the game just because it is a quote-unquote walking simulator. And the reason I say that is because it is an absolutely tremendous story and one that can be beat in a relatively short 2 to 3 hours. Now, without giving too much away, all I will say is that you do play as a member of the Finch family, and essentially the game plays out by letting you play a bunch of mini-episodes that represent the lives of previous members of the Finch family, all of which sort of weave together to give you some greater context into the lineage of the Finches. And despite the fact that I'm recommending this game for the summer sale, which is when you would probably think about more joyful and happy things, What Remains of Edith Finch is not the happiest game you could play on this list. But still, What Remains of Edith Finch is a tremendous and nothing if not memorable experience, and it's one that I think you could comfortably enjoy with 1 or 2 close friends, not because it has any co-op functionality, it doesn't, but because the game plays out so much like watching a great movie, it is an experience that I personally beat with a friend of mine. So if you do have a friend or two that are into really narrative-heavy games that really play out more like experiences than a traditional video game in the way that you think of it, What Remains of Edith Finch is definitely worth your time, will leave a lasting impression, and at $5.99 you really can't beat the price. Now next up is a far less linear and much happier affair than what you would get from What Remains of Edith Finch, and that is Lego City Undercover. Right now it's on sale for $3.99. Now this originally came out on the Wii U, but I didn't play it there. I actually played it on the Nintendo Switch a few years later when that system came out. And that's the thing. When it comes to Lego games, they've always been a little bit hit or miss for me. Some of them I've really liked, some of them I've just been sort of meh on, but I was pleasantly surprised by Lego City Undercover and its ability to take the Lego format and then basically apply it to a Grand Theft Auto style genre with a large open world for you to explore, and to really great effect. Now from a gameplay perspective, I'm not going to say that it's breaking any crazy new ground as far as the LEGO games that you've already played are concerned, but what I will say is that the humor is absolutely on point for this game, and while the load times can be a little bit annoying at times, for the most part I would say that it pays off with a lot of hilarious and wacky cutscenes, which is exactly what you would expect from a LEGO game. But if you like the light platforming action of a LEGO game, and you're particularly fond of a ton of different collectibles and just running around a giant open city that is, again, constructed entirely of LEGO bricks, Lego City Undercover shouldn't be overlooked. Yes, it can occasionally get repetitive at times, and it's not a game that's without problems, but I've definitely played worse LEGO games before. But nonetheless, if you're somebody who does appreciate open world games and you don't mind seeing it with a LEGO coat of paint, I think Lego City Undercover is a little bit underrated, and there are way worse ways that you could spend $3.99, so if you roll the dice on this, I am fairly confident you will have a good time with it. I know I did when I beat it a few years back. Now the next game on this list costs a lot more than $3.99, but it's still way cheaper at $29.99 than the full price that it normally goes for, and that would be Sekiro. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the Soulsborne genre is not one that I went into willingly, and in fact I was dragged into it kicking and screaming. However, after I finally acquired a taste for it through Bloodborne, Sekiro was the next game that I went after I had beaten Bloodborne. At this point I have beaten Sekiro, and I have played this one on the Steam Deck where it performs incredibly well, but if you've never played this game before, I would highly recommend it, provided you can stomach the incredible difficulty that it presents. And one of the things you'll quickly find differentiates Sekiro from other Soulsborne titles like Dark Souls or Bloodborne is that the range of movement is way increased compared to what you might be used to in those earlier titles. And that's great because the world of Sekiro is an incredibly fun one to explore. No, it's not technically an open world in the strictest sense, and it is still kind of a linear adventure, but it's large and complex enough and enjoyable to explore when you need a break from the combat, which again is as brutal as it's ever been in a Souls game, and it provides a pretty refreshing take on the combat as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that the combat in Dark Souls or Bloodborne was bad, it's not. I'm just saying that Sekiro is a little bit different, especially when you start getting into things like chipping away at an enemy's posture meter so you can deliver that killing blow. And true to other FromSoft games, I wouldn't say that it's setting any new standards in technical fidelity or anything like that, but artistically speaking, it is a gorgeous game. and one that is filled with memorable combat, thrilling characters, and one of the stiffest challenges in gaming to date. And again, $29.99 isn't the cheapest game on this list, but if you've never played it before and you've been curious about jumping in, I still think it's one of the more approachable entries in the genre, and it would definitely be worth a look. Next up is a game that I think is an absolute classic, and I say that personally as somebody who is not always the biggest fan of procedurally generated environments, or indeed the roguelike genre as a whole, but nonetheless, Binding of Isaac is still an amazing game. And while it definitely has that cute, chibi sort of art style, it's also as macabre and sort of disgusting as it is adorable, because again, the premise of Binding of Isaac is that your mother has gone crazy and is trying to kill you, and you have to battle through the denizens of hell and try to escape her. I think the biggest reason I enjoy this game so much, despite that genre not being my favorite, is that there is just such an overwhelming amount of enemy and item variety, that dying in Binding of Isaac doesn't really feel like a punishment at all, but rather it just feels like a fun new opportunity to start anew and see what kind of weird, wacky stuff you'll find whenever you jump in for the next run. And again, don't get me wrong, the game can be absolutely disgusting, and depending on your constitution for extremely mature rated games, this might not be your cup of tea, but if you're somebody who values gameplay above all else and you're looking for fast, frenetic action that is provided in a top-down Zelda bullet hellish sort of way, Binding of Isaac could give you literally thousands of hours of gameplay and you would still have fun every time you fire it up. And again, at $7.49, there's never been a better time to jump into the creepy world of Isaac. Next up is a game whose predecessor I played on the Nintendo Switch, although I believe this game has its roots in the Neo Geo as far back as 1994, and what I'm talking about is its sequel, Windjammers 2. Now, I played the original Windjammers on Switch and it was a whole lot of fun, but then I really got into Windjammers 2 with my buddy Ben when we played together on Xbox Live. And of all the games you could pick up for the summer sale, Windjammers 2 is probably the most appropriate. It sort of plays out like, I don't know, like Pong meets volleyball meets air hockey maybe, but essentially the goal of the game is to chuck a disc back and forth between you and your opponent and see if you can get it past them into their goal zone so that you can score points. However, one of the things that makes it interesting is each one of the individual characters that you can play as has various strengths and weaknesses. They might be incredibly powerful, but then also really slow, or they might be super agile, but not necessarily have the best special ability. So there's a whole lot of strategy associated with Windjammers, and if you've never played it before, it is an excellent game to play with a friend. Now, to be fair, I don't think this would be the funnest game to play solo, or at least I never felt the need to play it solo because I always just wanted to play it with a buddy, but if you've got a friend who's into some lightweight arcadey action, you could do a lot worse than Windjammers. And in Windjammers 2 in particular, I love the presentation here. All of the graphics are hand-drawn and they just really pop on screen. So if you're looking for a summer-themed, over-the-top, arcade, sports, action-y kind of title that actually has some elements of, like a tournament fighter, I guess, too, now that I think about it, Windjammers 2 is pretty great and a whole lot of fun in that easy-to-learn, hard-to-master kind of way. And finally, to wrap this whole thing up, the last game on this list is one of the most chill farming sims I've ever played, and one that I think often gets overlooked in light of like bigger, more flashy titles like Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon, and that would be Farm Together. At a glance, I would not blame anyone for taking one look at Farm Together and being like, that's probably not for me, because at first, looking at the artwork for Farm Together and some of the screenshots, it almost looks like a bad mobile game. And that's exactly what I thought I would be in for. But instead, what I ended up finding was one of the most relaxing, zen-like farming experiences that I've ever played. Now, to be fair, I'm not old hat at the farming genre, but I've played a few of those games, and Farm Together lands right near my favorites of the bunch. Chiefly because it does not punish you or really put you in any position where you have to really race against the clock or worry that your crops aren't going to get harvested on time, or that you're going to mess something up, or something that you build is going to be irreversibly there and kind of leave you hanging. No, Farm Together really prides itself on making sure it's as approachable as possible, and that at any point you can harvest your crops, you can take as much time as you want, there's no real, race against the clock scenario that's going to leave you stressed out. And on top of all that, it's set to one of the most chill acoustic soundtracks I've heard in any video game. Plus, as the name suggests, you can absolutely play this game with friends. So if you want to have somebody come over to your farm, or if you want to go visit somebody else's farm and do things like, feed their livestock or help harvest crops, you can definitely do that. But personally, I've had as much fun diving into Farm Together solo as I have, running around with friends on our adorable little tractors. And I'm definitely not the only one that feels this way. Nerdcrave actually had me over on his channel a few weeks back to talk about some hidden gems for the Steam Deck, and that was one of his picks. I'll go ahead and link that video if you want to go check it out. But yeah, suffice it to say, I think Farm Together is a game that constantly gets overlooked by people, but it really shouldn't, because if you're just looking for a very relaxing experience where, you're not in a rush to accomplish any particular goal, or you're not playing a game because you want to roll credits or anything like that, and you just kind of want to like chill in an adorable agrarian world for a little bit, Farm Together is worth a look. Alright, I'm going to be honest here, I had about like 20 or 25 different games listed here that I thought I would be going over, but ultimately I decided to whittle it down to a more manageable 6 or 7 games, plus I think some of these games are going to appear in future videos anyways. But hey, what about you? Are there any games that you've spent a ton of time with or beaten yourself, and you're just 100% confident in recommending it to somebody else while it's on sale? If so, let me know in the comments below, because, I'm always on the lookout for new games myself. As always, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch the videos, it means a lot to me. Have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.